Evening, everyone. Welcome to Tuleyome's January Nature and You lecture. My name is Jeff Ben. I'm the Education Associate at Tuleyome. As we're getting settled in here, if everyone could please make sure that your microphones are muted. That would be much appreciated. So I'll start off with a quick introduction of Tuleyome. So if you don't know, Tuleyome is a conservation nonprofit that is based in Woodland. Our mission is to engage in advocacy and active stewardship with diverse communities to conserve, enhance, restore, and enjoy the public lands in our region. The region that we focus on is the northern inner coast range and the neighboring areas of the Central Valley. If you're in Winters or Davis, the northern inner coast range are the mountains located off to the west, and we particularly focus on the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, which is the relatively new national monument that stretches for over 300 miles from the southern end of Lake Berryessa up through the Cache Creek Wilderness and all the way on up to the Snow Mountain Wilderness in Mendocino County. We do a variety of different things, including field trip programs for K-12 classes. We do hikes and trail building days that are open to the general public. We, of course, do this monthly Nature and You lecture series. And we're also one of the groups that is leading the effort to expand the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument by adding the Moloch-Loyic region, which is a culturally and ecologically important region that's along the eastern side of the National Monument. If you'd like to learn more about that effort or any of our other programs or events, you can do that at our website, which is tuleyome.org. All right, so without any further ado, I will introduce our speaker for tonight. So Dr. Jonathan Eisen is a professor at UC Davis with appointments in the departments of Ecology and Evolution, the Department of Medical Microbiology, where his lab studies microbial genomics and microbial communities. He is also a longtime amateur birder, wildlife photographer, and is a truly prolific iNaturalist contributor with over 60,000 observations, which is pretty incredible. Many of you may know him from his incredible photos of birds and other wildlife on social media. And so tonight he's going to be talking to us about some of that work, and we'll be focusing on hiking and wildlife at Yolo Bypass. So if you have any questions during the talk, let's just hold on to those until the end, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at that point. All right, Dr. Eisen, take it away.
All right. Let's see if I can get this working here. Thank you, Jeff, Dr. Ben, for the introduction. I've known Jeff for a while because I teach in this big intro bio class that he was our course coordinator for, and remarkably helpful. We are very sad that he has left to this new thing, but I'm very excited because I want to help him out with what he's doing here, because it's another part of my life, as he sort of hinted at there. So I'm not going to talk a lot about myself. This is my background. That's me not knowing how to use binoculars as a little kid. I got into birding when I was pretty little. My grandmother was I would go for walks with her and go look for birds. And then my first field work, my first biology research was on hummingbirds in Colorado. And that's me doing some nest observation or something like that at the Rocky Mountain Biology Lab. And but I'm a microbiologist now. So my birding is in my spare time, which, I don't have a lot of, but I trying to combine doing microbiology and birds occasionally, but I haven't really figured out how to do that. So most of my naturalist stuff, most of my birding is local, and I go out to Yolo Bypass all the time. And as Jeff said, I'm bit obsessive about posting to iNaturalist in the last few years. I have posted an observation every day since the beginning of 2020. And most of those observations are birds. If you want to know more about me, you can go to that. That's like a collection of all my links and social media and other things. And my photos are on SmugMug, and you can go look at them there. I'm not very good about organizing them, but they are on SmugMug. All right, so my outline, I'm going to give a little mini introduction to Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. And then I'm going to talk about I think it's my 5 favorite spots in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, show you some pictures of them, and then talk about some lessons learned from my outings to Yolo Bypass. And just as an introduction, I want to remind you that life is better with otters. Can you see the video? I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but every once in a while you stumble upon something amazing in Yolo Bypass, and this was a massive collection of about 10, 12, 14 otters hanging out at this one little spot that I'll tell you about in a little bit. My mom, who lives in Davis, went out with me a lot to Yolo Bypass, and we never saw otters, and she was convinced that they didn't exist. And when I saw this pile of otters, I called her up. She drove out, and they were still there when she got there. I hung around for an hour. So anyway, I'm going to do a little intro to Yolo Bypass, not a big intro, and then talk more about my favorite spots. So Yolo Bypass, if you don't know, is basically a flood control area for the Central Valley. And there's another flood control area that's similar to it along the Sacramento River. There are a few other ones, but this is our local one. There are all sorts of sloughs associated with it, and I don't know when it was actually originally built, probably by the Army Corps in the early 1900s or something like that. But I'm not going to talk about Yolo Bypass. I'm going to talk about the wildlife area, which is within Yolo Bypass, but just the wildlife area. So if we look, here's a map of, here's Davis over here, West Sacramento over there, Woodland up here, and the Yolo Bypass is this whole area here, and then there's a wildlife area that's predominantly south of 80, in between Davis and West Sacramento. About half of the park is open a lot of the time to people who want to go tour around, and about half the park is only open to hunters during hunting season. So this is just a colored, Google Maps version. Yolo Bypass is in this area in the middle here. And one of the things that I really, really like about Yolo Bypass is not only that it's close by, but that it's this really good model for mixed use of sort of environmental resources. It is a wildlife refuge. It's a great place for wildlife viewing and outdoor activities. It's used a lot for educational activities. There are active rice farms out in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, and there's also during season hunting and fishing out there. It is also, of course, sometimes flooded, as I will talk about in a little bit. It is used as a bypass occasionally when they need to spill water over. It's about 16,000 acres total. And again, about half of it is open when it's not hunting season, open to wildlife viewing and recreation. So again, going back, here's the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. And this is a map I got from one of the state sites that has outlined in it the different places you can go in Yolo Bypass, with some, not all of the trails labeled within here, and then the parking areas, A, B, C, all the way through H within Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. There is a tiny bit of places that you can go north of 80. There's a parking area north of 80, but most of the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, you get a little road off of 80, and then there's a little hill on the road, and you come into the park, and there's a parking lot right there. That's parking lot A. And then there's an auto tour that you can drive around on. That's, a decent road. It is sometimes really pitted and muddy, and sometimes when they put out new gravel and other things, it's in a little bit of better shape, but it's generally passable for any type of vehicle, except like after some really bad rainstorms and after the hunters sometimes, dig a little bit of trenches occasionally here and there with some of their trucks, but it's mostly passable. So this is on my picture collection site in Adobe Lightroom. These are the number of pictures at different sites that are all labeled with 4 stars. Those are the pictures I really like that I've taken over the years in different parts of Yolo Bypass. So as I told Jeff before everybody else came on, I've never given a talk about my photography or about Yolo Bypass. So it was a little bit overwhelming trying to figure out what to show here, what to do, how to pick things out. But I tried to narrow it down. There are places within Yolo Bypass that I spend more time than others. I probably go out there right now, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. In the summer, if I get up early, I might go out there more often. So I'm just going to walk you through some of my favorite places and show you some pictures and tell you a little bit about them. I didn't mention when I was saying about Yolo Bypass, another thing I really like is I like going to the same place over and over and over and over and getting a feel for the place. And as a birder, I'm not out to look for the rare birds. I bring my camera because it gets me out hiking and walking and seeing things. I like seeing the mundane. I like seeing the red-winged blackbird, and I'm not. I mean, I like the rare birds too, but anyway. But what I'm going to try and tell you about is some of the different little niches within Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. So the first one I'm going to tell you about is near Lot F. This is my favorite spot in Yolo Bypass. Lot F is out here. This is the deep water channel going up to West Sacramento. Every once a year or something, you can see a really big boat coming up from Yolo Bypass. It's very weird to be out in Yolo Bypass and see a giant ship coming up behind the levee here. But this is Lot F. It's sort of the southwestern most accessible area of Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. And then there are these trails shown in brown that go north of Lot F, and there are a couple of trails that go south of Lot F, but the nicest places that I go all the time are hiking on these trails to the north of Lot F. There's a little bridge at Lot F that goes over, you can walk across. There are a lot of people that fish there. So this is a little bit more detailed view of Lot F area. It's very wet a lot of the time, and then in the middle of summer, they frequently let some of these ponds dry out, but a few of the ponds are permanently wet, and there's this slough here that's also permanently wet. So there's always something going on, even in the middle of the summer, near Lot F. So one of the nice things is there's lots of open space there. You get lots of really nice serene views. Frequently massive fields of sunflowers or mustard out there. It's really just a very serene place. But if you go a little bit further in, if you walk in, it's spectacular. There are these ponds that are really unspoiled, and I frequently make little 1-minute videos there and post them as my nature therapy for other people. But it's just a really great place to go out and hang out. Different depending upon the time of year, but again, many of these ponds dry up in the middle of the summer, but a few of them stay wet. Just a little video show of one of the ponds when it's filled with water. It's really quite nice out there. So not surprisingly, because it's one of the wetter areas of Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, there's a lot of water-associated critters that you find out there. So, again, these ponds are frequently filled, not always filled. That's a great blue heron eating a cinnamon teal, I think, which is really disturbing. But I posted a lot of pictures of this when it first happened. There's, beavers and muskrats and otters that hang out in the water out there. There's lots of turtles of various kinds. There's a lot of fish. People do fish, especially I think for carp out there. There are a lot of carp swimming around, lots of other, water associated birds that are out there. But one of the nicest things out there is that in the trees that line some of these wet areas, there's incredible diversity of flycatchers and warblers and hummingbirds and other, small songbirds and things like that, that if you go out early in the morning in particular, you can see an incredible diversity of things. This is a marsh wren out near Lot F. They're hummingbirds in a nest that a colleague of mine, David Rizzo, who I bumped into while walking out there with his wife, they said, "Oh, have you seen the hummingbird nest?" And I had not, but they pointed it out to me. And then I went back like 2 or 3 times over the next few days to watch the hummingbird nest out there. I'm just sort of zipping through these pictures just to show you examples of some of the things that you see out there. This is a common yellowthroat. They hang out in all the sort of lower little woody plants near Lot F. Lots of flycatchers. This is an ash-throated flycatcher. There's, if you keep, I'm not going to go back to the map, but if you keep walking like maybe 2 miles north of Lot F or 1.5 miles, there's a section where the best warblers are, where I always see an incredible diversity of warblers. It's on the way to this Greens Lake, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. And so it's just if you manage to go far enough in there, you can see even more diversity. It's a very riparian area with interesting trees and ponds and permanent water and other things. This is one of the cooler types of birds that hangs out there. You frequently see them actually at Lot F itself. These are blue grosbeaks, and they'll hang out in some of the trees right next to Lot F. I don't remember what time of the year they do that. There are lots of raptors flying around. This is pretty rare. I've seen 4 bald eagles in Yolo Bypass wildlife area. I saw this red-winged blackbird chasing this bald eagle for about 10 minutes, starting at Lot F. I think they hang out over in the deep water channel more, and every once in a while they'll come over to Yolo Bypass wildlife area. Lots and lots and lots of kestrels hanging out there. But the best thing about walking near Lot F is if you go early in the morning, or even not too early, but 9, 10 in the morning, the owls that are hanging out there will get a little bit antsy and take off from the trees and fly away, and you can spot incredible sights of owls flying around right near Lot F. It's by far and away the best place to bump into. This site just literally a couple of feet away from me on a trail. Lots of great horned owls out there, but also every once in a while there's just like, I'm not kidding, like hundreds of barn owls along the trees, along the water as you walk, and they'll be out, flying around reasonably early in the morning. It's really quite spectacular area to go. So that's your mini tour of the area near Lot F. So next is this little area near Lot G. I call it the Magic Pond, as you will see why in a minute. So this is Lot G. And then if you walk east from Lot G, you can't, there's a bridge here with a gate. South of the gate is only open to hunters during hunting season. So you can't go south of this gate during any time if you're not hunting, and only during hunting season, can you go through that gate. But you can go along this path, and then there's a little channel here and a little path over the channel, and then you can walk along these trails. This is South Fork of Puda Creek, and the trails that are right next to the South Fork of Puda Creek over here are spectacular for diversity of wildlife and other things. And this is where the Magic Pond is. It's a little bit hard to get to the Magic Pond. There's this weird little berm of land here that you have to walk across, but it is still quite spectacular. That's the Magic Pond. Early in the morning, it is quite an amazing place. Depending on the time of year that you go, it's very different, but um, I love going to this spot and hanging out, and the diversity of things that you can see there is quite amazing. There's lots of, diversity of plant life associated with the pond, and lots and lots and lots of diversity of animal life that is also associated with the pond. So it's a really good spot to see some of the shire organisms, because it's sort of remote out here compared. It's not near 80, it's not near, a lot of the trafficy areas. That I think Jeff may have used one of these pictures of the baby killdeer for his advertisement for this. There's just, lots of your typical things, but lots of other things hang out right around that pond. An owl near the pond, a couple of owls near the pond. Lots of kingfishers hanging out near the pond. They were kingfisher kestrel little squabble out near the pond. A lot of otters hang out in the pond. I will show you lots more otters in a few minutes. It's not the best place to see otters in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, but there are otters that hang out in the pond. There are a lot of deer right along Puda Creek. But my favorite mammal, that this is probably the best place to see them in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, are the mink. I don't see them that often, maybe twice a year, maybe once a year. 1 year, a couple years ago, there were a lot of them, but they're out there, and they're adorable and very interesting and very cute. It's also a really good spot to see some of the rarer birds, rare for Yolo Bypass, not necessarily rare for California or other things. It's just because of the creek coming through there, and some of the plant life is very diverse. There's lots of birds that you just won't find in many other places. So again, there are more of these blue grosbeaks out there. There are a lot of vireos during the season, just gobs of woodpeckers out in some of the trees that line Puda Creek. It's definitely the best place to find orioles within, as far as I can tell, within Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. Again, I think because of the creek, there's a lot of diversity. House wrens. This is my favorite bird species probably around, or one of my favorite. It's the Pokemon bird. It's a blue-gray gnatcatcher, and unquestionably the area near Lot G is the best place to see them in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. Lots of yellowthroats that you can hear singing. Some rare birds. This is the only Nashville warbler I think I've ever seen, and I saw it right near that pond. It's also probably the best spot to see some diversity if you're interested in insect diversity. There's lots of diversity of butterflies in this area, a lot of swallowtails, a lot of butterfly relatives like the skippers, lots of coleus and crescents, and it's just, again, there's a real high amount of natural diversity out near this pond, and it's really quite a good place to just go hang out and spot some of these things. There are also snacks along the way. I actually went out there with my mom and my stepdad, and we brought the bags and collected a bunch of blackberries, and then they left and I stayed to look at birds, and they left the blackberries with me, and I left the bag on the top of my car. And when I got home, I saw this smear. It looked like I hit something in the street. I saw this smear of red on my roof of my car, and I realized I had driven away with the blueberry bag open on the roof of my car. I mean, blackberry bag open. All right, so moving back, this is closer to the entrance. If you come in the entrance and you just drive down this road, there's a big parking lot area here that a lot of people do walks to Lot C or loops out here. There's a boardwalk here, a little mini boardwalk. There's a porta potty. But walking in this area, especially just this direction, a little bit north of Lot B, there's actually really cool things that you can see in this little area right there. So this is Lot B. This is just an overhead view, and it's right in this spot, and then along this channel here and across, there's a little path along here that goes back towards you, where you can look at the levee. There's a little creek here. And if you go walking in those areas, this is the little creek near the levee. There's lots of things that the otters hang out and are here, so you can hear them. Sometimes you can't see them, but there are lots and lots of otters out here. This is a view from the boardwalk. It's a really nice area to look for rails and dragonflies. So there's just billions of dragonflies out there. There's lots of, what are these, cockleburs or something? They're very unpleasant. They will collect on you if you go hiking through some of these areas. Lots of, some of the standard birds, but it's a really nice viewing area because there is this little platform and you can go out there. This is Nuttall's woodpecker. For whatever reason, I don't understand, in parking lot B is the best place to see horned larks within Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. I have no idea what the explanation for that is. Again, sometimes rarer birds like the grosbeaks aren't that common out there, but this is all right around Lot B. That's a Swainson's hawk in the nest. That's a Swainson's hawk baby in the nest. Again, there's just lots of cool stuff out there, but the coolest thing at this area is it's the best place to see otters sort of generally around this area. I've seen otters, let's just say maybe 50 times in Yolo Bypass over the whole, maybe a little bit more, but at least half of the times I've seen them are right near Lot B in some of these channels. And they're awesome. They're spectacular. I can sit there for hours. The ones I was telling you about that I saw with my mom that I showed the video of was right near here, right near Lot B. And another great thing about this area is there's a couple of little bridges that you can walk across. And if you're on the bridge, for whatever reason, the otters kind of let you get closer. And so they just hang out right near the bridge and you can get really good views of them. And occasionally there are a lot of them. Sometimes it's just solo otters, but as you can tell, I like taking otter pictures, and otters are just spectacular. Every once in a while, they seem to really like the crawfish. I've mostly seen them eating crawfish. I will see them eating fish occasionally, but I think the crawfish are like their primary diet. And if you see orangish poop in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, that's most likely otter. I think the mink might also eat the crawfish, but generally it's probably otter poop. I also have learned to make GIFs from some of my series of pictures. So this is a little one I made from a series of pictures of an otter right from this bridge right near Lot B, having a little fish snack. And again, this is also from this little bridge. They're pretty curious. They're sometimes shy, but they're not exceptionally shy. And for whatever reason, when you're up on this bridge, they seem much less shy about interacting with you and looking at you. They'll sometimes click, and I consider it them saying hello to me. So another really nice spot to go is if you drive out, instead of turning right down towards Lot B, if you keep going, sometimes there's a gate here that is shut because the road here is not quite as good. So sometimes they shut that gate. But you can drive out here and then drive out in through, these are rice fields out here, and there's something called Rice Point. There's a little turnout area and parking area, and then you can go on walks out to this big pond right along 80, or you can go for walks out to Greens Lake, which is a permanent lake out in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. So even in the middle of the summer, this is a really good place to see things because it's permanent, semi-deep water out there. And a lot of these other places dry up in the summer, but there's always water in Greens Lake. And if you go out on this trail, you can sort of do a loop around Greens Lake, or you can just go out and then you can sort of head back this way and loop by some of these other areas. And I'm not going to show many pictures from Greens Lake. There's all sorts of cool things out there, but I want to show one of the reasons to go out this area is if you look in this direction, and sometimes in this direction, it's where some of the massive flocks of snow geese and swans, and other geese and ducks hang out during the winter. And it's a really good place to see those. So I couldn't find some of my better videos. I mean, I have videos where there's like 200,000 snow geese. I could not find them today, but this is where you get to see some of the massive, massive flocks of geese and ducks and other things. So it's a little bit overwhelming at times, but it's pretty cool to see that many. There are a lot of swans that go out there too. There's sometimes flocks of, 20, 30, 40 swans. It's mostly geese, also a lot of other water birds that hang out there. Okay, so the last of my top places to go within Yolo Bypass is just driving the auto loop. I mean, I like to get out. I go out in part to get exercise and to do things, but when the weather's bad, or if I'm like doing like I'm on the phone or doing something else, it's actually really, really nice to drive this auto loop and do it slowly with the window down so you can hear things, listening for different birds. I now use the Merlin app, which is an app for bird song identification. And I turn it on when I'm driving really slowly, and it can identify things from my car. And I will, if it seems interesting, I'll stop and look around. And it really is one of the best ways to see the diversity of things within Yolo Bypass. You don't get some of the songbirds and some of the smaller birds, but you can see them from some of the spots, but you get basically everything else, or a sample of everything else when you just drive. So it's one way, it's two-way here, and then it's one way here to loop back. And all these other ones I think are two-way. So driving that loop, I'm going to show you some of the things. There's lots of ringneck pheasants out there. Without a doubt, the best place to see them is driving along the auto loop. Every once in a while, this is right near Lot G, just driving along the auto loop near Lot G. There's a lot of swallows that hang out in some of the water areas as you're driving around. During the right time of year, there are big flocks of blackbirds, frequently red-winged blackbirds, tricolored blackbirds, yellow-headed blackbirds, and brewer's blackbirds, and other things. The yellow-headed I really like. They're quite spectacular. There are a lot of grackles you will see when you're driving around. And of course, there's lots of water birds, both in the sky. So you get really nice views of some of them flying around when you're driving on the auto loop, but you also get lots of nice views of them in the water. And all of these pictures that I'm showing you were taken, I'm pretty sure all of them were taken from my car driving around the auto loop. Every once in a while, these are shy rails, a Sora. I still remember I was driving along the backside of the auto loop and I saw this and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I haven't seen one of them. And then its babies came out, the baby Sora rail. There are many more babies back here. And I took like 800 pictures, spent like an hour there. That's another Sora, and they were going back and forth bringing food to the babies. And then I drove like another 15 feet. I finally decided to leave. I drove another 15 feet and I saw, I don't have the pictures here, I saw a Virginia rail with its babies, like 15 feet away. And this is all just driving around the auto loop within Yolo Bypass wildlife area. There's lots and lots of curlews and other shorebirds that hang out during the right time of year that you can see best pretty much by driving around the auto loop. Dowitchers, sandpipers, stilts, yellowlegs, all of those types of birds. It's really, there's of course lots of American coots out there. They're big, I don't know if you call them flocks when they're just waddling around on the ground, but lots of big groups of American coots wandering around. Lots of typical birds, lots of herons and egrets. You get really good views of them. They're not as afraid of people when you're in your car generally than when you're walking around. So you can get really good views of these birds from the auto loop in your car. Occasionally sniper tend to be hard to see, but occasionally you'll see one fly in and then you can spot where it was. They're remarkably well camouflaged, so it can be hard to find them when they're not flying. Lots, yeah. Every once in a while you get something shocking within there. I always stunned when these birds eat something that seems bigger than half their body. That's in a very windy day at Yolo Bypass. Lots of the birds eat the crawfish, just like the otters. When the crawfish are out, it's like festival for the herons and egrets and otters. That's some non-bird. I don't know what that is. So when you're driving along, there's also, during the right time of year, tons of these woolly bear caterpillars that I think are salt moth, baby salt moths. But they're fascinating to watch as they crawl around on the road as you drive around. These guys also sometimes crawl around on the road. They come out. They're usually targets pretty quickly if they're crawling around. I don't know why they're doing it, but you can get good views of them when you're driving around. There are coyotes out there. They're not many. You don't see them too often. I don't think it's quite the right territory for them. But there are coyotes out there, and made a little GIF of this one walking around in Yolo Bypass. They do sometimes seem to be hunting things in the water, but I've never really seen them catch anything. I'm not sure what they're doing. But another great thing about the auto tour is it's definitely the best place to get good views of the diverse raptors that you see in the park. They let you get closer than they normally would also. So American kestrel with some mammal snack. There's gobs of red-tailed hawks out there, as you might expect. Red-tailed hawks everywhere, and you can get, again, really spectacular views of them. Every once in a while, there's something a little rarer, and also really usually find them by driving around on the auto loop. This is a short-eared owl that I saw out there. I've only seen them like 3 or 4 times in 15 years out there, but I've spotted them originally on the drive on the owl loop, on the auto tour. Definitely my best views of northern harriers are along the auto tour because they tend to soar looking for birds along the water, and they'll come within 10 feet of the car or something like that. There are, again, I've only seen merlins twice out there, but this is one of the times I saw them, and again, both times spotted them just driving around the auto loop. This I saw a couple weeks ago after one of the big rainfalls. It's a very, very wet red-shouldered hawk hanging out right at the entrance to Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. There's some that are rare. I've only seen a few sharp-shinned hawks out there. Lots of Cooper's hawks out there. Lots of white-tailed kites out there. Every once in a while, again, this is the first time I saw a bald eagle. And again, I've seen maybe 3 or 4 out there. But my favorites out there are the peregrine falcons that you can see. And again, most of the time I've spotted them driving around the auto tour. This was actually the coolest. I was driving, here's the sign for the auto tour, and here's a peregrine falcon sitting on the sign. And I took a bunch of pictures, and then I drove a little closer and took a bunch of pictures and made a little GIF of the pictures. It was just hanging out on this sign, letting me get really, 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 really close. And later on in the day, I came back. I actually went for a hike, like 2 hours, and I came back and it was still there. And there was a guy taking pictures of it, and he said, like 3 hours earlier, he had watched it eat an entire duck or some bird, and he thought it was just too full to move. So just sitting on this sign for like hours and hours. All right, so that's my main tour of some of the different spaces in Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, and now is a little bit on some lessons I've learned going out there. First lesson is there are many other nice spots. So the levee that's actually outside the park, right as you drive in, you can hike along that levee. Dogs are allowed on that. They're, I think, technically not allowed in the park. Bikes are allowed on that too. So there are a lot of people that bike or bring their dogs and go down that levee, and you get really nice views, especially in the evening, because you're looking east And with the sun behind you in the west, you can get really nice views of Yolo Bypass and Sacramento and the Sierra from that levee. South of Lodef, not just north of Lodef, but south of Lodef is really nice. The rice fields near Lot C can be really interesting. If you head east from Lot C, there's a lot of bird diversity in those rice fields. The trails north of I-80 actually have some really interesting things. They're much less expansive. There's an exit road that the hunters are allowed to use. And then when it's not in use, it's a really nice area to walk over in the east of the park. So lesson 2 is, some people may be familiar out there with the bats that live under the causeway and come out in the summer. They're migratory, so they're only around there. Well, either they're migratory or they hibernate. They only come out in the summer. I think they're migratory. But in the summertime, at sunset, you will see these massive flocks of bats coming out from under the causeway. I think it's about 100,000 of them. It takes 10, 20 minutes for them all to fly out. I think this is a little video of them starting to come out. It's a stunningly spectacular thing to see. Really, really quite cool. I don't have a really good camera for night photography, but this is some pictures I was taking of the bats coming out, and this was insanely spectacular to see, because taking pictures of these bats, and then that's not a bat flying out with the bats. I like to use this Thomas Pynchon quote here, because if I was a bat, I would be very, very scared of this. That's a peregrine falcon coming out, and they come out with the bats to hunt the bats and the giant flocks of bats. There's a peregrine flying into the flock. There's a peregrine that's caught a bat. I've seen a peregrine once with a bat in its mouth and one bat in each talon. There's a peregrine eating a bat in flight. It's a little gross, but it's also spectacular to see this. And it's one of the best places to see peregrines anywhere around here, is to just go out in the summer when the bats are coming out, and you're very likely to see a peregrine falcon. The nice thing is you don't have to go into the park. The park is only open from sunrise to sunset. They lock the gate, but the best place to see the bats is actually from the little hill before the gate. So you can drive up here, park on the hill, and then go see the bats, even when the park is locked up. Another important lesson is it's a great place to get views of Sacramento and the Sierra. And if you're interested in like landscape photography, there's some spectacular views. These are all from different parts of Yolo Bypass. And when there's snow in the Sierra and when it's clear, you just get these spectacular sort of shots if you use a telephoto lens from Yolo Bypass of Sacramento and the Sierra. And frequently there's, giant flocks of birds flying in front, so it's pretty cool. I couldn't find it, but I have a few really cool pictures of peregrine falcons flying in front of Sacramento, in front of the Sierra. I could only find pintails, but they're cool too. All right, so lesson 4, reminder, it is a bypass. So sometimes it's closed. Sometimes it is an ocean. Sometimes when there's wind, it's like a wavy ocean. Sometimes the entire bypass is flooded, and it sometimes takes a while to recover from that flooding. They don't open it up necessarily immediately. It's really spectacular if you go along that levee to look at the flooded Yolo Bypass. But the park is closed when they do this. Lesson 5, planning is somewhat helpful. So remember, it's open only from sunrise to sunset. I have seen many people get locked in. The rangers drive around and try and tell people to get out, but if they're on one of the side little roads or sometimes they will get their cars locked in and can't get around the gate. Early AM and late PM are the best in the summer. It's brutal out there in the middle of the day in the summer, and there's very little to see anyway. Some simple gear is useful, boots in particular, long pants. There are ticks out there. I've never gotten one, but I have been out there with other people who have gotten ticks. Long pants and socks and things help, and a hat, obviously water, and There are some spots in Yolo Bypass where the mosquitoes are really bad during some parts of the year. So I usually have bug repellent with me, although I don't frequently use it. Lesson 6, use iNaturalist, or at least look at iNaturalist, because it's one of the best ways to find out what's going on. And it's also a great way to share what's going on. There's a page you can go to. There's a project for Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, and it has things, if you've never used it, this is sorted by, I think, most observations out there. So you can get a feel for the types of organisms that are seen. I've made project pages for the mammals of Yolo Bypass, so you can go just to this project page and look for observations only of mammals within Yolo Bypass. I've made a project page for birds of Yolo Bypass, and as Jeff was hinting about, if you look at the most observations, Matt K is number 2 with 2,000, and I'm number 1 with 21,000 observations of birds in Yolo Bypass. I know it's not normal, but I do like doing it. And it was really useful for this talk because it helped me find, so here are my most observed bird species. And then when I wanted to find pictures of some of the raptors, I searched within, it's really a good database. So I can pull up all of my observations within Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area of hawks, eagles, kites, and allies. And these are the 9 species that I've seen out there, 999 red-tailed hawk observations, 4 bald eagle observations. But this is how I found some of the pictures that I showed you, or found the dates for some of the pictures that I then found in my photo collection. And the last lesson is you never know what is next. So I'm going to make people, you don't have to shout out or anything, to make people try and guess what some of these things are. If you do or don't know, you might, this is a really cool bird. I had never seen one before. When I observed one in Yolo Bypass, it was only the second report of one out there. It's a lark bunting. And I've now seen 3 lark buntings out there. There are like 6 observations of them in Yolo Bypass, but I've seen 3 of them. If you go out a lot, you will see occasionally rare things. This is not a rare bird, but it's an egret that is eating a rail. So, you do see some pretty weird things out there. Anybody know what this is? It freaked me out for a while. I couldn't figure it out. I was like, just so shocked and everything. It's a albino, a leucistic red-winged blackbird. So it's a pretty normal bird, but it has this sort of albino coloration for much of it, especially on its head. I posted a lot of pictures of this. Lots of other people saw the same bird and posted lots of pictures. And one cool thing that just happened this year is someone published a paper on community-based sightings of atypical birds, and they included in their paper my pictures of the red-winged blackbird. I post all my pictures with a free-to-use Creative Commons license. As long as they say where it came from, then I'm happy. So they gave me credit for this and put it in their paper, which I thought was really cool. Anybody know what this is? I had no, I was like, oh my God, that's the weirdest, like, I don't know a lot of reptiles, but that's a yellow-bellied racer snake, which they're out there. They're just not very common, but I had never seen one before. This was up right near Lot F, going for a walk. Anybody know what this is? I had no idea. It's a very, very rare snake. It's a giant garter snake, endangered species. Not many reports of it out in Yolo Bypass, but I've seen 2 of them out there. So you never know what you're going to see. This was during the fires. It was really smoky out there, but you could get that's the sun, some cool views of things out there. And you never know when you're going to bump into otters, and otters are always important. And I'll end it there, Jeff. And I'm happy to answer questions or talk or go away.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Eisen, for an awesome talk and some truly incredible photographs. So this talk and our whole Nature and You lecture series is funded by donations from supporters like you. So if you haven't already done so and you're able to, we would very much appreciate a small donation to help us keep the lecture series going. I put the link in the chat for that. Our next lecture is coming up at the end of February. That's going to be with Dr. Glenn Holstein on biodiversity and wildflowers in Northern California, and he'll be previewing some of the wildflower tours we're going to be doing this spring. So if you've got any questions, you can either use the Zoom raise your hand feature if you want to speak your question, or alternatively, you can put the question into the chat and we can read it from there. I'll get things started. So I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people to head out to the bypass. It's been kind of rainy recently. How are conditions out there now?
I haven't gone in a few days. The roads were that back road that I was mentioning was closed the last few times I went. So the main road when you come in and go to the right, but that road was in pretty good shape. This was, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, so 4 or 5 days ago, maybe. So definitely going to Lot B is generally, the roads are usually in pretty good shape to get out to Lot B. If they did repair the roads quite a bit, so driving out all the way around the auto loop a little bit ago was okay, but they do get pretty rutted from some of the trucks driving out there for the hunters. So I'm not 100% sure, but going into the levee certainly is easy because that's on the outside and that's always available. And walking along the levee is awesome. Going into the park, I'm pretty sure getting to Lot B is pretty easy right now. And I don't know, like, again, a week ago, I was hiking around in there. It was muddy, but but it was nice.
All right, Steve, you want to go ahead?
Yeah,
Hi, Steve.
Jonathan, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a location, a website where you can go to see what people are currently seeing, like now, today, or last week, or, if I wanted to see if the red-winged blackbirds were there, if I find a place to say so.
I mean, I think eBird is probably the best place to see that for birds. I use that. I don't post a lot to eBird because I actually don't. I identify things when I get back home, and I have a harder time identifying them in the field. And I'm also taking pictures of a lot of other things, so I don't just do birds. But when I want to know if something is being seen out in some place, I usually look for birds. I usually look for eBird. iNaturalist, the problem is that many people take, days or weeks or months before they post. So you don't get a really good sample of the latest things on eBird, that on iNaturalist that you do on eBird. With eBird, people frequently post as they're doing it, or, certainly that day or the next day. So I definitely look, like I just went on a trip to Maryland. I haven't been traveling a lot since the pandemic, but I went on a trip to Maryland and I looked up on eBird what people were seeing in the last week. Because on eBird, you can select, show me the last month, show me the last week, show me the last, few whatevers. And it definitely works better for that than iNaturalist. If you want to know where within a particular place to see particular things, I use iNaturalist for that because the map function on iNaturalist is really good. And you can get a really good, quick sense of where people are seeing things within a particular place.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Renee or Rini?
Oh, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so I was wondering on the Magic Pond, it look like from what you were showing, it's really backed up to like the South Fork Nature Preserve? Is that, it looked like it was right there. Can you access it? Do they connect? Can you access it from South Fork or do you have to access it?
How do you get to the South Fork? No, you can't get to South Fork Nature Reserve from there. I don't think there's a farm in between. I don't think you can get through because there's a farmer's property. And now, a few years ago, I think you could. Like 10 years ago, when I was hiking out there, it seemed like you could do that. But now there are signs up that say the park ends here. and
Okay.
then there's a farm. So I think that if there's no way to do that, and the other side of the creek, you can't get across the bridge. So
Okay.
that's usually not open. So I don't think they connect.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a few questions in the chat. So Gus Field asked if you could say something about the cameras and lenses you typically use for
Yeah.
these photos.
I totally forgot to put that in there. That was supposed to be in there. Yeah, so I got a digital camera about 10 or 11 years ago and practiced in Yolo Bypass using it. And that was a Nikon D70 with a pretty nice lens that I got because I was going to Costa Rica and I wanted to have a nice lens. It was a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, just really quite nice. And then about 5 years ago now, I bought myself a 50th birthday present, and I researched cameras for bird in flight photography for about a year. And there's this amazing photographer who also reviews a lot of cameras named Mark Smith. He's in Florida, posts things on YouTube, and he has websites about this. And he basically, I didn't want to switch from Nikon because I just got used to Nikon. And he had two Nikon systems that he recommended for bird and flight photography. One was about $20,000 and one was about $2,000. And even though it was my 50th birthday, I got the $2,000 one, which was a Nikon D500 and this 200 to 500 millimeter lens. And I used that for many years. And then about a year and a half ago, I got the new Nikon 500 millimeter prime lens, which I wasn't using the 200. The zoom lens, I was always at 500, and it was really heavy because it has all this machinery. And Nikon came out with this new ultra lightweight, not ridiculously expensive lens. It was like $3,000. So I did get that. So that's now almost solely what I use out in Yolo Bypass. I frequently carry my macro lens with me, but my iPhone 14 is so good with most pictures that I almost never connect the macro lens when I want to take a picture of a bug or a butterfly. I just haven't. I do bring it with me in my backpack, but it's almost always the Nikon D500 still, which is a great camera for. It has really good autofocus, and so really good for birds in flight. And this 500 millimeter prime lens is half the weight of my 200 to 500 millimeter lens. So I can take pictures one-handed with, I mean, it's really amazing. And I keep thinking about getting a mirrorless lens camera system, but I just like my system so much, I haven't felt the need. Hope that answers.
Great.
I also have a really good backpack, which is pretty important for me. It has a place to store everything, and it has a cover for when it starts raining, and it has a camelback so I can just have water when I'm going out hiking, and it has a little clip for my phone. And that has also been really, really important, to just have a good backpack that you can put everything into. And
All right, so another question from the chat. You mentioned hunters and hunting season a few times. When is hunting season out there?
it's a darn good question. I don't actually. I think it's October through, or part of October through right about now, at end of January, maybe. But I'm not. I should I should know that. I don't know when it opens or closes. I just show up one day and the back of the park is closed, because they shut it off for the hunters, and then another day when I show up, the gates are open. So I'm not really sure, but it's something like October through February.
All right. Gretchen has a question that I actually have had myself during the talk. What noises do otters make?
The ones that I've heard them make are kind of just like chirping, clicking noises. Like every once in a while when I'm in one of these spots that it's not very open, I wish I could describe them more. They're kind of like just chirpy, not hummingbird like noises, but clicky, chirpy noises. That's really useful, I know. Uh, I couldn't explain them better. I'm not very good at it. I know it when I hear them. Some birds I could mimic the calls better, but not the others. They don't make loud noise. I mean, I've seen them fight occasionally and then they'll make loud noises, but most of the time it's very quiet, little like squeaky, chirpy noises.
Have you ever seen any foxes out there?
I have only seen foxes around here twice, and they were not at Yolo Bypass. They were in between Davis and Woodland on one of the little levee trails. I've never seen any out at Yolo Bypass.
And then could you give some more detailed directions on how to get to the levee area where the dogs are allowed?
Oh yeah, so it's just at the entrance. If you go off 80 onto whatever the exit is for Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, Road 32, I think it's labeled as when you're coming from Sacramento, and it may be labeled as the same thing when you're coming from Davis. As you get off that and you head south, and then there's just this little entrance to the park. Instead of turning, when you go up a tiny little hill off the road, instead of turning left to go into the park, you can just park on the right. And there's a levee that goes to the right that heads south for like 2 miles to Puda Creek. And then it stops. You can't go any further. It's again, that's within the farmers area, but you can go 2 miles on it. And that's where I see tons of people with their dogs.
Right. See, one last question. Another one I've been wondering myself. Why do they prohibit bicycles there?
I wish I knew. Well, so I think I know. I was really angry about this when I first moved here because I used to live on my mountain bike, and I was thinking I could go out there like every day.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that it's because two things is my guess. You definitely disturb the birds more than cars do. So the auto loop, like in Sacramento Wildlife Refuge, you can't even get out of your car except at very specific areas along the auto tour there, and in many other wildlife refuges, because the birds are okay with people inside cars frequently, but they're much more startled. They will take off. It costs them a lot of energy when people get out. And I'm pretty sure that bikers are not treated the same by them as cars are. And the second is there are a lot of people driving in cars not paying attention to where they're driving because they're looking at birds. And I think there'd be a higher risk for bikers getting hurt out there. But yeah, when I first moved here, I was so frustrated about this because I used to bike out there and then hike around. I'd lock my bike up and hike around. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the official answer.
Great. All right. So with that, we will wrap things up. Be sure to join us for our next lecture at the end of February. It will be all about wildflowers.